Hello there, Kenneth Clarke.
One of Britain's leading Tories has been running hard lately, and not just for high political office. Mr Clarke, how do you justify peddling cigarettes to the third world?
I don't peddle cigarettes to the third world. Hey, we actually market better off people in Southeast Asia who wish Western cigarettes instead of the state-owned ones made by their state-owned factories.
So you're not... It seems there are two Kenneth Clarkes. The big Tory, who's played an influential role in his party's affairs, and the man who's in the pay of big tobacco. Kenneth Clarke is also deputy chairman of BAT, British American Tobacco, the world's second largest cigarette manufacturer. Now, BAT stands accused of a major international sting to illegally smuggle black market cigarettes into Vietnam to break a government monopoly.
The strategy there was to bring cigarettes in illegally in order to force the Vietnamese government into a position where they would negotiate a joint venture with BAT.
Certainly, as a company, we have a firm policy of not having anything to do with smuggling, and that we will continue with.
With sales declining in affluent countries, tobacco giants like BAT are likely to do whatever it takes to break into the huge markets of the poorer nations. In Vietnam, where smoking is a cultural tradition, millions of dollars and lives are at stake. The Socialist Republic of Vietnam. After a lifetime of war, there's a new feeling of opportunity. If not for the people, then certainly for big tobacco. The Communist Party is still in control, but Vietnam's been opening up. And what a market. In this land of 70 million people, it seems almost every second person smokes. The toll is mounting.
Bác trước đây có hút thuốc lá không? Hoặc là hút thuốc lào không?
Có.
Bác hút từ năm bao nhiêu tuổi?
Nói chung là ông hút cũng từ lâu, từ hẳn tuổi, thanh niên.
This man has come from the country to Hanoi's leading cancer centre, the K Hospital. Here, business is booming. New figures predict a grim future. In the next decade, tobacco will kill 7 million, or 10% of the population. Nearly all will be men. Few Vietnamese women smoke.
Ở Việt Nam, tỷ lệ người hút thuốc là một trong những nước mà có cái tỷ lệ người hút thuốc cao, và những người hút thuốc thường là có cái xu hướng hút từ trẻ.
Professor Duc is the director of the K Hospital. He knows the lure of Vietnam's market is too tempting for the big tobacco companies.
Làm sao có nhiều người trẻ hút và người ta tuyên truyền rồi có một chính sách về marketing để làm sao có nhiều người trẻ hút thuốc từ lúc trẻ, vì đó sẽ là những cái khách hàng lâu dài cho các hãng.
Until 6 years ago, the Vietnam government had kept foreign tobacco companies out. A state-owned monopoly, Vinataba, supplied the local market, providing close to $100 million a year in profit to the government. BAT wanted to break Vinataba's monopoly and set up a joint venture. It did so by creating a demand through smuggled product in the country.
BAT wanted to come in both doors. They were, at the same time they were engaging in a smuggling activity, as indicated by the documents, they were engaged in joint venture negotiations with the Vietnamese government. The strategy there was to bring cigarettes in illegally in order to force the Vietnamese government into a position where they would negotiate a joint venture with BAT. That joint venture would then produce cigarettes that could be sold both by BAT and Vinataba in a variety of countries.
Canadian lawyer Eric Legressley is the world authority on BAT's Asian strategy. He's had access to BAT's internal documents, following a United States court ruling which forced the company to make them public. The documents reveal the full extent of the smuggling operation.
You don't see the word contraband being used. You don't see the word smuggling being used, at least not very commonly. But what you do see is the term duty not paid, or DNP, being used, and where BAT themselves identifies and defines what that term means. And it's clear that it can only mean contraband products.
A key player in the illegal trade was Singapore United Tobacco Limited, BAT's main Asian distributor. In one memorandum, BAT states candidly that the Singapore company has de facto responsibility for most end markets, which they define as legal or transit, in other words, contraband. In another, BAT keeps tabs on the price it sells to its Singapore distributor, and then the end price as the goods enter Vietnam, at a time when their cigarettes were banned. This is how easy it is to smuggle cigarettes into Vietnam. Moc Bai is a major checkpoint on the Cambodia-Vietnam border. Yet barely 300 metres away and in full view, this woman has no problem. She simply rides around the checkpoint, taking another load of tobacco through the rice paddies. The Vietnam government says it places a high priority on halting smuggling. But the chief at this gate is happy to concede it's an uphill battle.
Tại khu vực biên giới như thế này thì tôi có thể nắm được là họ sẽ tập trung ở đâu. Thì những nơi đó là những cái khu vực mà có những cái nhà của dân phía Campuchia giáp biên giới Việt Nam, thì họ sẽ bỏ để những hàng hóa là thuộc thuốc lá ở đó. Sau đó lợi dụng lúc thuận tiện nhất, không có lực lượng chống buôn lậu thì họ sẽ bằng cách chẻ lẻ chẻ nhỏ vào Việt Nam.
As we speak, another load of cigarettes. This time, BAT's flagship 555 brand makes its way across, bound for Vietnam's market. Around 10 million cigarettes come through this and other points on the border. That's each day. And there's a more than ready supply of carriers.
Khó khăn lớn nhất hiện nay tôi thấy được là một số nông dân mà ở vùng biên họ rất nghèo, rồi trong lúc nông nhàn không có việc làm phải tham gia để mà vận chuyển thuốc lá.
1/3 of the world's cigarettes disappear into the black market. Now, do I believe that BAT, if we can, make the assumption that 1/3 of BAT's cigarettes also disappear into the black market, do I believe that they should be able to control those sorts of quantities? Yes. Do I believe that they're responsible if their most senior executives are sitting in meetings where they're planning these operations? Yes.
The Vietnam government, which loses many millions of dollars a year in unpaid duties and taxes, caved in to the BAT strategy. The company got its joint venture, and the BAT production line now hums along nicely, pumping out as much as the market will take, all from inside the government-owned factory.
The business is not just to sell legal cigarettes. The business is to sell cigarettes however necessary. Sometimes the companies decided the only way they could get into a market was through smuggling. And these are people who are willing to compromise a lot. They've already rationalized that their products are going to kill half their consumers. So it's not a big step to say, well, if I'm going to sell products that'll kill people, I'll do it through smuggling as well.
But it's not just BAT which is accused of smuggling. There's compelling evidence that smuggling has been a modus operandi of the major tobacco companies around the world. The St. Lawrence Seaway, on the border between the United States and Canada, too, has been a haven for the black marketeers. Lewis Mitchell has the job of stopping them.
This island right here is Cornwall Island. This is in Ontario. Off over here, this is St. Regis Island over here. This is in Quebec, the Quebec portion. And this piece of mainland after your back over here, that's in New York State. Somewhere along the waterline, right in the middle, is where the international border runs.
In the mid-1990s, a major smuggling ring took advantage of this jumble of jurisdictions to run billions of cigarettes into Canada's black market. The aim of the operation was to defeat the country's high taxes on cigarettes.
It has been described as the biggest case of corporate fraud in the history of the country, and it's something that's ever more complicated because of the international dimensions. So what, in effect, we had were some multinational tobacco companies that basically said, we can't afford to let the government of Canada set fiscal and health policy. We're going to have to dictate that for them. We're going to have to force them to back down. We're going to, in a sense, go to war against this country to prevent it from having these strategies that are reducing tobacco consumption.
The cigarettes were made in Canada and marked for export only to the US. But the cigarettes only got as far as Niagara Falls on the United States side of the border, where they were held in a bonded warehouse. From there, they were taken by an organised crime group and trucked across the top of the United States. Finally, the tobacco was run over the river and back into Canada, where it had begun its journey. RJR McDonald tobacco executive Les Thompson was a linchpin in the operation. 2 years ago, he pleaded guilty to laundering $150 million and was jailed for 7 years. The company paid a $30 million fine, but claimed Thompson had acted alone.
If it's true, I think Les Thompson is Superman and the tobacco companies are just about as dumb as a rock. And that if we look at the facts here, you've got somebody who is a salesman, a career salesman with the company doing what he was told by the company. And they're claiming that this man single-handedly was responsible for over half of all the sales of product by RJR in Canada, and nobody in the company noticed.
But the Thompson case has kicked on dramatically. On the basis of the evidence it's collected, the Government of Canada has launched a racketeering action against RJR Reynolds, claiming billions of dollars in unpaid taxes. The European Union too has filed racketeering actions against RJR Reynolds and Philip Morris, claiming the company's orchestrated smuggling into its member states. And in England, BAT is coming under real pressure. Its pride of place in the city under threat because of a special inquiry into smuggling allegations by Britain's Department of Trade and Industry.
The issue of Britain's relations with Europe has poisoned the internal politics of the Conservative Party for a decade.
And now Kenneth Clarke faces new questions. An extraordinary letter has emerged, written by a former BAT executive, Ian Hacking. The letter was written to the chairman of BAT, Martin Broughton. A copy was also sent to the deputy chairman, the Right Honourable Kenneth Clarke. The accusations couldn't be more stark. Ian Hacking explains how BAT has been brilliantly successful over 30 years in growing and optimising the profits from managing the smuggling of various group brands into numerous international markets. Hacking then poses the question, why did our blue chip company need to produce billions of pounds from this unsavoury source?
But in the light of the more hysterical and fanatic anti-tobacco campaigners often distort what
Ian Hacking. When we attempted to ask Mr. Clarke questions on the Hacking letter, this was the response.
Excuse me, could you leave? Can we go to a private meeting if that's okay?
You've denied me any chance to ask him those questions.
Well, you haven't asked me.
Ian Hacking is a former BAT marketing executive, extensive experience in Latin America and the Far East. He's not a zealot, he's not an extremist, he's a former tobacco industry executive who feels that when BAT comes out and issues a denial, as they did to Parliament in Britain in the early part of the year 2000, enough's enough. He has to speak up. He's a man of some honour and integrity in doing so, and he's taking a risk in doing so, and I'm sure he wouldn't have done it lightly.
No, we haven't got time to do it inside. We haven't got time to do it inside.
We'll do our best out here. Okay.
After first refusing our request for an interview, Kenneth Clarke QC relented, though on his terms.
Okay, and a couple of questions, that's all. I'm not going to do the great long investigative journalist bit.
Mr. Clarke, do you accept that BAT has been knowingly involved in smuggling tobacco products into Vietnam?
No, I think that is quite untrue, but I'm waiting to see what the results will be of the British government's DTI inquiry, which is now taking place into all these wild allegations that have been made in recent years.
Well, now, have you received that from Ian Hacking?
Yes, I think I have.
Right. Now, do you acknowledge that this memorandum is telling you that BAT has been brilliantly successful in managing smuggling operations around the world for decades.
Well, I don't believe it's accurate, although that's the allegation the letter makes, but that's the kind of thing that the DTI is now looking into.
You're deputy chairman of the company. Don't you want to know for yourself why you're waiting for a bunch of public servants?
I'm waiting for independent inquiries rather than fanatic campaigners who make these allegations without producing evidence in support of them. And we are certainly, as a company, we have a firm policy of not having anything to do with smuggling, and that we will continue with.
This man is no fanatical campaigner. He's a former senior member of BAT.
He's used by fanatical campaigners, and no doubt it's now being seen that people are now trying to discover whether this ex-employee is able to provide any evidence to support his allegations.
Are you telling us he's lied here?
I'm telling you, it should be properly investigated, and I'm not going to agree with him simply because you pressed me vehemently on the streets of Newcastle.
You're paid tens of thousands of pounds a year to hold high office in BAT. Isn't it your role and responsibility to know the truth?
Precisely, it is.
Don't you want to satisfy yourself you're not being paid with money derived from criminal activity?
I certainly don't want to get any money from criminal activity. The company does not condone, organise or take any part in criminal activity. The idea that one piece of paper should in itself make me not wait for a Department of Trade inquiry seems to me rather preposterous.
You're in the position of being a senior political figure in this country and not knowing whether or not you're being paid with criminal money.
I know that the company's policy is to have nothing to do with smuggling, not to condone smuggling. We instruct our employees to have nothing to do with smuggling, and I know that so far no one has produced any evidence at all to substantiate any of these allegations.
Kenneth Clarke might be able to dodge further questions from this reporter, but the smuggling allegations aren't going away.
Clarke's taking a risk because the Department of Trade and Industry in the UK is going to go through all this evidence and show it is true. BAT is involved in smuggling.
And BAT's finances may also be at risk. Ian Hacking's letter discloses the company had planned to strip £500 million out of its profits to clean up the mess from smuggling. In the streets of Vietnam, there's overwhelming evidence of BAT's success, the endpoint of an international enterprise which has swept all before it. Indeed, it appears Vietnam's customs officials remain blissfully unaware of how London had plotted and planned to crack the country's market. I have something here which we got from England, which I'd like you to look at. It says in that letter there that BAT has been brilliantly successful in managing tobacco smuggling. Now, does that sound like an admission to you? It's perhaps a testament to BAT that as Mr. Lay ponders the evidence against the company, he does so with the help of a BAT 555 cigarette, incidentally from a packet which had been smuggled into the country.
Việc các cái tập đoàn mà họ sản xuất, họ buôn bán là việc của họ. Họ làm bởi vì lợi nhuận của hãng rồi của họ thôi. Chúng tôi phải có những cái quan hệ theo các cái ngành của chúng tôi đối với quốc tế để mà ta có một cái tìm hiểu làm sao để mà nếu thực sự có chuyện như vậy thì chúng tôi cũng phải ngăn chặn.
While the customs chief contemplates how he'll nail the multinational which makes the cigarettes he smokes, the state-owned tobacco company, which generates so much money for the country, is only too happy to think the best of its joint venture partner.
BAT ở Việt Nam đã hợp tác rất là tốt với chúng tôi. Còn những thông tin mà ông cung cấp thì chúng tôi cũng tham khảo. Nhưng mà chúng tôi có một cái thói quen lâu nay là cũng ít có bàn tới những cái việc gì khác của các cái công ty bạn.
It's part of the politics of tobacco in the developing world that, whatever the language, in the end, money talks, with health policy running a poor second. In a country which is accustomed to repelling the foreign invader, there are those who desperately want to see the back of companies like BAT.
Vì vậy, nếu có một lời thông điệp hoặc một lời thì đề nghị với các công ty thuốc lá nước ngoài thì chúng tôi phải nói các ngài xin chuyển cái nghề kinh doanh khác, đừng tiếp tục sản xuất thuốc lá.
The Vietnam government says it's concerned about the health of its people and has announced it will ban all foreign cigarettes by the end of the decade. But why would that worry BAT? After all, as it's demonstrated before, subverting a government's policy is all in a day's work.